So are we ready to go? Or are we waiting for an intro?
I think we're ready to roll.
Are we ready to roll? All right, good deal. Thanks for coming on the last day of the nice virtual conference here. My name is Jeff Frisk, and I'll be presenting with my coworker, Mr. Jeff Pike here. We're both of the GIAC certification organization. We're here to talk to you today about Darwinism with certification exams and to introduce a little bit of GIAC's new CyberLive program. So just as kind of a brief introduction or what we're going to be covering today, I'm going to give you a quick intro about Mr. Pike and myself, a little bit about our backgrounds, talk just a little bit about an intro to the GIAC certification program if people are not familiar with that, and then kind of get into Darwinism defined. Mr. Pike's going to talk a little bit about Darwinism and kind of our concept of adaptation here. Then we're going to get into a little bit of the specific CyberLive program with some design goals, talking a little bit about our GSE program as a baseline, some of our certification and roadmap things, design goals, and then a demonstration of the system that we're going to roll through live here in just a little bit. So that's kind of just an intro for what we'll be working on here together. So just as a quick way of introduction, my name is Jeff Frisk. I'm the operations director for the GIAC certification program. This is my coworker, Mr. Jeff Pike. He is the technology director at the GIAC certification program. And we have both been here doing this in our work roles for about 15 years or so. So we've kind of been involved both with the certification industry and with the NICE group for quite some time. Primarily, a lot of what we do is work with other certification providers in some of the training and certification subgroups, as well as work to give input on some of the updates to the NICE program, as well as a lot of the mapping that we do with certifications and training and things of that nature. Mr. Pike, do you have anything to add about your background specifically?
Not really. I think you covered it pretty well there with the we've lasted twice as long as the average U.S. marriage, so we're doing pretty good.
Take that for what it's worth, huh? And you know, Mr. Pike and I have different backgrounds. I come from more kind of a hardware engineering side, and again, kind of involved in the operations side of our program. Or Mr. Pike, I know, has been a government contractor previously, heavily involved with the cybersecurity aspects and some of the technology development stuff that we do here. So one of the things that both Mr. Pike and I have been working on together for 15 years or so is running our GIAC certification program, GIAC Security Expert, or GSE, which is the kind of premier hands-on certification in our cybersecurity industry here. So we're going to set some of the stage for that, as well as kind of talk a little bit about some of the previous work that we've done with hands-on testing or performance-based testing. That's something that, you know, we have been involved with and very interested in for quite some time. That was something that we kind of went live with on a larger scale back in 2008, but as we realized at that point, you know, technology in general and some of the kind of internet characteristics that are needed to do internet-based performance-based testing weren't quite ready yet. So we'll get into some of the specifics there in just a little bit as well. Just to give you a real quick intro to both the GIAC certification program and, you know, some of the things that we do here. So the GIAC certification program actually just turned 21. We started in 1999. And one of the things that's a little bit different about our program compared to some other ones is just we have a real focus on skill-based, job role-based certification. So instead of having a one-size-fits-all approach, we have really kind of laser focused on job roles that align pretty specifically to some of the nice work roles as well. We'll look at that in just a little bit. But one of the things that's a little bit different again about our program is a really targeted certification approach, having more than 35 skills-based certifications out there that really align to job roles. So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, we kind of really focus on the hands-on concepts instead of just theory for a lot of the specific certification areas that we work with here. You know, another thing that we're real proud of, and we've worked with the ISO and ANSI 17024 program for quite some time. We have 11 of our certifications that are accredited under that ISO ANSI 17024 program. So something that we've been working on together for quite some time there as well. And I just have a quick poll here, and I'm wondering if anybody can see that or has a vote. I'm just wondering if anybody out there has taken a cybersecurity certification exam in our industry before. So if you'd like to offer up your input there, we'll have a couple different polls just as we kind of move through here to see what different people's feedback might be in those cases. So one of the things that's unique about the GIAC certification program, we primarily focus on really technical kind of skill sets as well as hands-on content. So really working with some of the, you know, JTAs or job task analysis surveys that we do to really focus on the skill sets that are needed to perform specific duties in the cybersecurity workplace. So 35 certifications, you know, are aligned with critical InfoSec job roles. And one of the big things we see different about our program and some of this new CyberLive question types and program goals that we're going to be going over here really validate the kind of hands-on skill sets that are needed in that regard. So just as kind of a rough look into some of the things that we do, again, this isn't you know, a specific one-to-one mapping. It's a little bit more representative, and it's probably based off of a version ago of the NICE framework. But just to kind of show you the way things are set up, you know, job roles or work roles that are maybe defined within the NICE framework. GIAC certification program having these, you know, 35 or more real skill sets specific certifications, we align pretty well to different kinds of work roles that might be there either in, you know, the current or previous embodiments of the NICE framework here as well. So, you know, moving into a little bit some of the Darwinism concept here and what we're talking about, Mr. Pike, I'm going to transition over to you, and you can roll through these next group of slides here, but I'll kind of start off with you introducing Darwinism as we think of it here.
Yeah, so I'm not going to beat people over the head too much with Darwinism, but when we think about Charles Darwin, we think about the theory of natural selection, the theory of evolution, survival of the fittest, all of that, right? And so if you want to summarize that, the way you can think about it is any organism that exists today, including humans, was successful in the environment from which it came. And that includes us or any of the animals and so forth. And that also includes our exams. Multiple choice exams were successful in the environment from which they came. Theory of evolution is non-predictive. It just describes the past and the present. Can we skip ahead to the next slide, please? And so that's the Galapagos Islands, and that's where Charles Darwin took his voyage aboard the HMS Beagle, and you know, he saw all these creatures that were foreign to him, and as he pondered all of this stuff in a relaxing sort of, you know, picturesque environment, he formulated the theory of natural selection, and that's great. It's a beautiful place. However, this environment is not our environment. And next slide, please. And go ahead and click that one more time. And there we see our environment. That's what we're dealing with in the world of information security, constant attacks and all of that. So, you know, it makes the Galapagos look pretty good. Next slide, please. Back one, there we go. And so this is kind of our environment. And, you know, our environment is our customers, right? And our customers, our clients. Gosh, I don't know how long ago it's been now, but I remember one particular thing, and it was a nice related thing. And it was maybe six years ago or so. But I was there at DHS, and so were many other cert vendors, and one particular DHS official, and I've anonymized all of these quotes, but these are actual people I have in mind that said these things. But she said, I would rather have a capture the flag vendor than any of your multiple choice certifications. And we're sitting around the table. It's a bunch of vendors with a bunch of multiple choice certs, and rightly or wrongly, you know, she didn't want them. And none of us had any real hands-on at the time. Well, at GIAC we had the GSE, but we can't scale it. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. And so we're like, yeah, I mean, we got the psychometrics. It shows these multiple choice things are valid. She was done with it. She didn't care. She was, you know, she was pretty much over it. I don't know whether it was because somebody had mapped some certifications to some jobs and people who had those certifications could not do those jobs. But if it wasn't hands-on, she wasn't for it. And basically you can summarize all these quotes by, you know, just, if it ain't hands-on, it ain't nothing. That's what a lot of our customers told us. And so we were like, gosh, we've got to get this together and get it done. We had been working on it for a real long time. I think Mr. Frisk will go back into a little bit of that. Next slide, please. And then so basically what we were hearing from our customers is if we don't do something hands-on, multiple choice is going to die. It's going, you know, it's going to go the way of the dodo bird and all these other extinct species. I don't believe that it actually will. There are still some things that are better tested with multiple choice, but the message was clear from our clientele that we have to get some real hands-on in our exams. And so we worked on that for a long time. There were many technical challenges, but we finally achieved it. And I'll pass it back over to you, Mr. Frisk.
All right. Just the poll that we put up before, asking people if they've previously taken a cybersecurity certification exam. You know, it was pretty close, about 50-50 or so. I think 43% of the people said they had taken a cybersecurity certification exam, and 57% said they had not. So just trying to gauge the room here a little bit, the virtual room. You know, to see if people are familiar with these types of things, if you're familiar with what we're talking about with multiple choice versus kind of a more advanced item type, if you will. And there's lots of different advanced item types that are out there. I see when I'm air quoting here, I kind of fade into my background. I'm gonna have to air quote a little bit closer to the screen here next time. So we're gonna get into a little bit of the design principles and some of the things that we've looked at. So our GIAC Security Expert exam is far and away the most prestigious in the industry. Now, you know, the good news is, wow, people that have that are the true tip of the spear, the true cyber ninjas and experts out there in the world. I think the downside to that is it is a 2-day face-to-face hands-on lab experience where People come together, and since 2003 or so, and Mr. Pike and I have been delivering the GSE together, since 2005 or 2006 or so. It is far and away, right, the way to tell if someone is a true security expert. But as we found, especially in the, kind of COVID landscape here, it is definitely not scalable, right? It takes us to fly a bunch of people into location, lots of different laptops networked around, right? You got to stay there for 2 days. So we've kind of cracked this problem, or cracked this nut, as far as hands-on skill sets go, but in a little bit more of an isolated environment, right? Mr. Pike, do you have anything further to add about the GSE or design parameters, things we're looking at there?
You can just see from the numbers, 258 people since 2003. It really does not scale. We can fit 30, maybe 40 people in a lab now. The bad news is we're not doing any labs right now because of COVID. So we want to be able to, this is, as you said, the very tip of the spear, but you can do more good by helping more people. And so we really needed to get our hands-on ideas out there in a scalable way.
Cool.
So that's what we did next.
So now I have another quick poll question here. And, mileage may vary on how people define a true performance-based item. And I don't mean to call our buddy Wallace Judd out by name here on the slide, but Mr. Pike and I have been involved. And again, we've been in this industry and doing these kinds of things together for 15 years or so or more. One of the first things we did when we kind of got into this part of the industry about the performance-based, items, was we joined up with the Performance Testing Council. I know the Performance Testing Council is still around. So, Mr. Pike, I'm sure you probably remember we, went to the Performance Testing Council meetings. We were all excited with this, performance exam that we had, that we know how to give to, a few people. And, a psychometrician, Wallace Judd, and Wallace, if you're out there, great to see you. Sorry to call you out here without letting you know. But when we first joined and we're members of the Performance Testing Council, one of the kind of, premier places in our industry where we could go and try to figure out how to do this stuff in a scalable way, psychometrician friend Wallace Judd had a great example, right? He said, hey, these performance-based or practical, exams are really straightforward to understand. And he has a crane operator example. So the people giving crane operator test, right? They said, hey, you can just go get in the crane, right? We have a huge crane out here and big piles of things to pick up. Hop up there, get in the crane. Your test is going to be, can you, bring the crane over and pick up the right things and put them in the right location without hosing everything up, right? So that was a true example of a performance-based test where someone would get in there, get behind the wheel of the car, or get behind the, cockpit of the plane and go. Now, in some environments, that's easier to do than others, right? Which we realized as well here. So I see, the poll results of people that voted coming in, I don't know, about half and half. Some people have taken tests that have real performance-based items. Maybe people aren't sure. Maybe you don't know. One of the big differences that we learned early on with some of the Performance Testing Council things and just our industry research was that, there are lots of different ways to kind of approach this tangentially. Instead of just getting in the actual crane and moving things, there are simulations, right? I think a classic example is a flight simulator versus actually being in the cockpit of a plane. And simulations have their place, right? There's also kind of creative item types that are out there of drag and drop. If you're trying to design a network system or whatnot, and you want to know where to put the firewall, instead of answering a multiple choice question about, do you understand that, you can drag and drop the picture of a firewall where that should go in a network, diagram. And those things are good, right? I don't think we're knocking those at all, but based off our experience, we really wanted to hit this full on, right? With a lot of information and real life type scenario things. So we were paced by technology a lot of times. We, kind of trotted this out earlier on, as I mentioned. And I think maybe the industry and technology wasn't quite ready for it. So, inherent kind of internet-based issues with before HTML5 was around, bandwidth, resolution for different types of devices. So in addition, there are different accrediting bodies out there. ANSI, is one of them that a number of us are familiar with. And it's hard to try to figure out how to accredit a true practical or performance-based exam or items on an exam. So, no fault of the accreditation bodies, they didn't really lead the way. And so, GIAC, as Mr. Pike kind of mentioned with Adapt or Die, listened to Darwin and our customers, and we created the CyberLive platform that we're going to be talking about here for the next little bit. So what CyberLive is it is our term for hands-on real-world scenarios that are in GIAC certification exams presently. There's more information on the website. You can go there. I'm going to give you a quick kind of run through of what we're talking about. So this is where we have real environments, not simulated environments. They're typically virtual machine based. Excuse me. It could be a couple of different virtual machines networked together. But what it does is it actually has people perform the critical tasks that they need to for specific different types of job roles that are there. We initially rolled this out with our real advanced GXPN certification, the exploit research and advanced penetration. Since then, we've kind of brought this into play with the intrusion analysis and instant handling, penetration tester, and some forensics things, and worked through our ANSI accreditation process as well to make sure everything was, accredited properly. So why did we do this, and why do we think it helps, right? Before we hop into a couple real life examples here. Really helps, I think, to affirm that people can do what they say. It helps individuals with kind of job security. And, we've talked about this concept of being able to have the confidence in yourself, or the imposter syndrome. That helps there. It helps hiring managers as well to make sure that people are going to be in a specific position, that they have the skill sets they need to do those, actual jobs that are out there. And then I think it helps in the general kind of industry or public space as well, to make sure that hands-on requirements are really clearly kind of defined, and they do bring some clout in the industry in that regard. So thinking a little bit, and a couple quotes here, I won't get into these or read them to you, you can take a look at them, but generally the feedback that we've received from all of those different kind of counterparts, the people taking the exams, hiring managers, or those that are defining a need for qualified people that they need in those kind of job roles, as well as the industry in general, the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Right now, of course, sometimes if people can't do the job, right, they're not the first ones to say that they love the CyberLive questions, but in general, industry has really adopted this, and I think the feedback has been very, very positive. Now, when we're thinking about a couple of the design goals and how we went into this, again, I mentioned, we started thinking about this early on back in 2005 or 6. We actually had a couple of false starts with launching full-blown programs in 2008 and 2009. We worked with our scheme committees and subject matter experts out there when we perform job task analysis and get people's input on what's critical and frequent, for exams and important in that regard. What we really tried to do is to get feedback from a lot of subject matter experts and members of our scheme committees and advisory boards on this topic. Here are some of the kind of basic design principles that we came up with, right? Really good to be focused on real world tasks and virtual machines and not just simulations. One of the things we really like about actual virtual machines doing actual tasks is that there's multiple ways to fail, right? Sometimes if we just look at a simulation, it's kind of guided through and you can't fail the same ways that you can in real life. With the virtual machine-based CyberLive questions that we have, there are multiple correct solution paths, right? You can choose path A or path B, just how in real life, different people problem solve different way. And there's lots of different examples of how that happens. But I think the failure space is wide open there. Instead of being stuck in a simulation where you can only fail a couple different ways, or you can only have one right or wrong answer, it's wide open, right? So that's something that we really like about it. Another thing as well, our scheme committees and subject matter experts really talked about wanting to have this be meaningful, right? So we kind of have a rough design parameter here where if someone can't pass any of the hands-on items or any of the CyberLive items on an exam, they shouldn't be able to pass. So in general, again, this is a little loose, but the CyberLive components for a certification exam typically count between, 25 and 40% of an exam. So meaning if you can't get any of the hands-on questions correct, you're not going to be able to achieve a passing score there. And then one other really great design principle that we had was, instead of needing to redo all of the blueprint information and all of the job task analysis outputs, what we realized is we're hyper-focused on the most critical, important, and frequent topics. So we didn't really have a need to do a new job task analysis because we were just augmenting the way that we are delivering some of that content in that regard. So a little bit about some of the design goals and kind of parameters there. I'll show you a couple other things quick, and then we can get into a live demonstration. So just kind of looking, and Mr. Pike will show you a live example of this in just a minute, but opening up the GIAC exam engine, there's a question with a hands-on exercise, and you can launch the virtual machine there. You know, when the virtual machine comes up, there's an introduction. There's a way to go back and forth between these two kind of things. You can also look at the, you know, question if you'd like to see that, if it's complex or you have to jot down some information, right? That there's ways that you can go back and forth. And then what this does is it actually opens up the virtual machine. And this question, when we're looking at things, you have to go through some hands-on keyboard, actually command line things to come up with how you might answer a specific question. And again, one of the things we really like about this is there are multiple ways to fail, right? We're not just limiting people to a simulation-based kind of approach in this regard. One quick note here on performance and some of the data. Now, I'm wondering if anybody out there in the room is a psychometrician. Usually I go with it with a show of hands, but I'm just wondering, I think I have a poll up here if you're a psychometrician. Now, I'm going to full disclosure here. Neither myself nor Mr. Pike are psychometricians, although we have full-time, you know, psychometricians on our staff. You know, and actually, this joke goes over better when we're flying into a conference and presenting, but, you know, we didn't even stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night, right? But I think we know enough to be dangerous about this. I don't play a psychometrician on TV, although I see some of you do, which that's wonderful. The point by serial is a very complex calculation, and a representative or example calculation is kind of listed up there. What we think of with the point by serial or an RPBI is it's really a discrimination factor, right? And so what that means to me in layman's terms is that it really kind of correlates well. You want to have an item discriminate so that people who take that question on a test and do well and pass that question or answer it correctly are also the people that do well and ultimately pass the certification exam. That kind of correlation or discrimination with an item is something that we really look at, one of the key determining factors. Now, again, I'm just kind of playing a psychometrician on TV here. I'm not an actual psychometrician, so mileage may vary, again, the way people do this, but given reasonable difficulty values, because the RPBI is kind of centered in the sweet spot, it doesn't really do well with questions that have really complex difficulty or very easy questions. But if a common kind of value is 0.2, we've seen that our multiple choice item discrimination does very well in that regard. But when we measure these with the CyberLive questions, we see that they typically discriminate a lot better even. So what that means is just the answer to one of these CyberLive practical virtual machine-based questions correlates very, very well to people that pass the exam, people that get those questions correct. So that's something that we're real proud of in a kind of loose psychometric, you know, treatment here of what a point by serial is or an RPBI that we typically look at to kind of gauge item performance. So as another quick slide here, just some of the, you know, background. We initially released these in 2016 on our GXPN, one of our most advanced certifications. And then we've kind of been moving through the ANSI certification process as well. Started off with our GCIA intrusion analyst, one of our longest standing certifications that's very technical. 2018, introduced this content to the GPEN penetration tester and GCIH incident handler. And then earlier this year into some forensic certifications. And we aspire roadmap wise to work with web application and some of our security essentials, and then reverse engineering malware into next year. So I have one more poll question for you here before we move into a live demo. And I'm just wondering, since I've been yapping for the last 25 minutes or so about this, would anybody actually like to see Mr. Pike roll through a couple of these CyberLive items? Oh, resoundingly, imagine that. People would like that. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing, Mr. Pike, and get this over to you here. And then I'd love to have you roll through some of the CyberLive questions that you have lined up.
All right, I believe I'm sharing my screen now.
All right.
I'm not a psychometrician. I did play one on TV once, but the show was canceled. And that's it as far as jokes go. They don't get any better. So yeah, let me rearrange my screen a little bit. Let's get rid of this poll.
So this is the actual exam engine, right, Mr. Pike? Is that the deal? You're in the GIAC exam engine now?
Yeah.
Right.
So right now we're taking a GCIA practice test, and this is what the candidate would see. Typically they're a little bit further in, but you see the question and the answer options, and the question tells you what you need to do on the virtual machine. And so you click for view virtual machine, and that takes you into the virtual machine. And then you do the stuff it asked you to do on the question. Now, most candidates get to this point and they're happy to see the virtual machine and the command prompt. And they're like, oh, what did it ask me to do again? I know I'm certainly in that mode as well. And so you have this handy little review screen where it goes and it says, okay, we're going to use TCP dump and WC to determine the number of packets involving the well-known port. It's not telling us the port used by the DCE RPC port mapper. In the file, exercises day 5, scenario 2. How many packets are using that port? All right, so now we go to it. Five. What was it? CD scenario 2. And then, so now we would use TCP dump and WC to do that. So we have to say TCP dump, that runs the command, minus R. We're going to read that file. What is it? Let's see, there it auto completes it for me. And then we can put a filter in there. And the port mapper happens to be TCP, and so it's going to filter on all TCP packets, and we want port number 135. And then we type that output to WC, and we count the number of lines, and that'll be 1 line for each packet, and it'll just spit out a number. It should, and tell us the number of packets, unless I've fat fingered something. 66. And that should be one of our answer options. And there it is. And we select that. And there, we move on to the next question.
Hey, so Mr. Pike, real quick, you know, I think although you performed that task properly, right? And thank goodness you remembered all the command line, you know, the functions that you need to, but there's lots of ways to fail, right? Someone could hose that up in almost any number of infinite ways, right?
Yeah, I'll probably hose the next one up in some combination of those infinite ways. So once again, I've opened a terminal without even knowing what the task is. We're going to run Zeek in readback mode against this file in the bro directory and analyze the result using Zeek cut and grep. Now, Zeek is a packet analysis tool. It used to be called bro, so they recently changed the name, hence some of the references to both bro and Zeek. You'll see there that it's in the bro directory. So let's see if we can find that and run it. Okay, we're in home GIAC. Okay, so there's bro in readback mode against team 2, DT2, T2, or whatever, PCAP. And then if it's run, we should see a bunch of files. And then we do see a bunch of files. And we are supposed to be looking for the FUID of the file downloaded from that host. See, that's very specific. So we cat files.log, and that's the files downloaded from all the hosts that are in this bro section. Pipe that to Zeek cut. Transmitting hosts FUID. Pipe that to grep 6552.108.11. 6552 up. Oh, see, Mr. Frisk was talking about the spectacular ways to fail. And I said cat file.log instead of files.log. So if you don't know what all the commands do and you mistype something, you could be in for a bad time. If you type everything correctly and you know what you're doing, then you can arrive at the correct answer, which there's the FUID for that host. And that should be one of our answer options. Look at the last three there, 5G1, and that's the guy right there.
So, Mr. Pike, did you do that on purpose just to prove my point that there's lots of ways to host these things up, or no?
No, I'm not that good, man. I've got this keyboard protector on here, and I mistype stuff more frequently than I ever did. And you know I was never that good, so.
Yeah, right. One of the questions that came in is, do we record what the examinees do and what steps they've taken? And the answer to that is, yeah, we record all these. But as you can see, you know, although we do some auto grading, the way that we formally record these answers that makes this mesh very well, right, with our ANSI accreditation, is that you're entering the answer in a big string of kind of multiple choice answer entering in that regard. So instead of the typical 1, 2, or 3 answer options, you can see there's 10 or more in a lot of cases in that regard, which kind of takes out that random guess option. But in that regard, instead of giving partial credit or have to worry about different things, it is a binary. You got the right answer, or you didn't in that regard. So, Mr. Pike, I think you're gonna hop into one more here.
Are there any more questions? I was going to do one while you were answering questions. Keep people engaged and not.
Yeah. If anybody has questions, we can sure do live questions and answers while Mr. Pike is working on this as well.
We'll do day 5. So yeah, I am doing another one. We're going to use, I figure we wouldn't be complete on GCIA without using Wireshark. So we're going to use Wireshark to read scenario 1. And the question here is asking us to export a SMB object that is related to passwords. And what is the password revealed? So it's kind of little mysterious sounding, but if you're familiar with Wireshark, you know you can go in there and you can just export objects. You know, there's a whole lot you can do. I could click on any of these things. These are all rabbit holes. If I don't know what I'm doing, that I can jump in and I can stay there until the exam's over. And GIAC is, we're happy to let you stay there if you want to in any of these rabbit holes. But this is the one.
Pike, sorry, someone just asked a question. I know we're kind of, you know, getting close on time, so I figured maybe we can answer it real time if that's okay with you while you're doing that. They said, if any testers crash the VMs and, you know, do we allow more time and things? And I think from my side, sure, you know, if you do something catastrophic and crash the VM, you can always start it back up, right? You can reset the VM, and you see there's a little reset VM button over there on the side. So if people do crash the VM doing destructive testing, let's say, they can restart that, but that happens. And then the question is, do you allow more time for these? And yeah, now we don't allow infinite amounts of time. So all of our times are tested, and we've done a lot of research on how long, you know, answering a question like this one takes people to do. So we put a lot of research into that. But yes, as Mr. Pike mentioned, you know, with a time test, instead of answering however many it is, 100 questions or 50 questions, or, you know, maybe 20 or 10 of these, if you spend all your time on one question and you don't know how to do it, you could, if you want, run out all your time on that exam. So we don't really police that too carefully, but all this stuff is very upfront as far as, you know, what's in the exam blueprint and what's expected of people regarding certification objectives, as well as covered on all the practice tests. So you get to look at that, just about exactly the same kind of concepts before you'd hop into a real live exam. Carry on, sir.
Well, while you were giving that great explanation, I completed that item. And we do have another one, but the password there was customer first. And, you know, Wireshark exported the SMB objects for us. And so it wasn't a problem to reconstruct the file and recover the password. This one here is a little packet crafting exercise. It's potentially a little bit more involved. But if you've answered all the questions, we've got time, we can dive into it.
I think so. I don't see any open questions here. Oh, wait, let's see. Is there a weight difference for the level of questions? Yeah, and we probably won't get into specific blueprint stuff, but one of the questions are, and you know, yep, there is weighting concern. So if a question is going to be covering a number of different areas, you know, that might account for maybe what, instead of me asking you 5 multiple choice questions to be able to get arriving at that answer, it's timed and weighted accordingly. And then the other question is, depending on their easy or hard, you know, difficulty wise, the goal is not to make everything more difficult. So these exams are difficulty matched with all other exams that we do. But yeah, you know, we're cognizant of that as well. Instead of asking you to do a 45-step question and only counting for a couple minutes, we've gone through extensive testing with that. And the goal is to have these ones, you know, difficulty-wise, be straight down the fairway of what's expected, and then to give people enough time, again, rabbit holes notwithstanding, time to get stuff done.
One thing to add on the difficulty is that's always been a fascinating number to me, because you know, all anybody is ever concerned about is how difficult is it for me? And, you know, you can say, hey, 80% of the people get this one right. But if you're not one of the 80%, then you're not liking that item very much. I think we do find that people that are actually practitioners, they generally tend to like these questions because there's no trickery involved. We're not asking anything that's around the fringes of the job, anything that's like too hard. Hey, you got to know a certain trick, or, you know, anything that doesn't work reliably. And they actually like that because they can go in there and they may not have, you know, certain terms or certain things memorized, but it actually can be easier for some people. And the people who are just, you know, hey, let's memorize stuff and, you know, look stuff up or whatever, and are like that. And the people that freak out with their, you know, hands on a keyboard and don't spend much time with the hands on the keyboard, they have a harder time with these. And I think part of our vision and hope with these is that, you know, they are not extremely difficult. We want the people that don't have, you know, a lot of hands-on keyboard skills to not be intimidated. Go ahead and try it. And if it doesn't work, try again. But you know, and get better. You know, it's all about improving. So yeah, we'll test my hands-on keyboard skills here, given that.
Right on. Hey, and while you're doing that, I'm just a little unclear on, and I was a little unclear on starting time, sitting around for a little bit. If we have a hard stop, maybe someone can let us know. Otherwise, please roll on. If anybody has any other questions, we can sure address them in the chat or try to do that live as well, as I think we're coming up to closing time on the work that we're doing. But please carry on, Mr. Pike, sir.
So we were asked to set source address of all 10s. I'm doing that. We're in Scapy, where it's a packet creation, packet editing tool. So I'm setting the IP source address there to 10.10.10.10. And our packet name is packet. And we want we need to add a timestamp. Variable name in our case is packet dot time equals 1, 2, 3. So let's do that. Do this to write the packet WRP cap to temp out.pcap. And oops, I'm pretty sure I need to put quotes around that, or it's not going to work. Packet name, packet, quit.
Pike, while you're doing that, we have one more question that came in. Are the browser computer restrictions to be installed so they don't use outside help? Yeah, so this is a consumptive environment, right? We're giving you this VM instance, so you can't go outside. You can only use what's here. It's not internet connected, although the tests are internet. They're in proctored environments, whether that's at a Pearson proctored center or through a remote proctoring situation. But in any way, no one can go outside of the environment here in order to get help with answering those types of things. So as far as browser computer restrictions, you're in our VM here. You don't go outside of our VM. So the tools that you know will be available to you are described in advance. Is that a correct answer to that question, Mr. Pike?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and I see that we're past time, and if we're past time and we need to stop, we can do so. Or Pike, do you want to finish up this one? And
well, it's pretty much done. We've got the MD5 sum there, and that will be, I think it's that one. Let me go back and check. 94C. Yep, ends in 94C. That thing ends in 94C. So we are good.
Good deal. Well, I appreciate you putting yourself, live on the spot here. It seems like you did pretty well. You got all those questions right. Good deal.
Better than you're used to.
Better than I would do. Anyway, I realized I started a little bit late, and it looks like we're over time here as well. Appreciate everybody being here. And if anybody, again, would like to get back in touch with us, let me just see here. I have our email addresses up here. Pretty straightforward. Both of our first names are Jeff, and we have single syllable last names. I'm Frisk, and he's Pike. jfrisk or jpike@giac.org. You can get in touch with either of us. And we really appreciate y'all being here. I know it's been a long virtual nice conference, and we're kind of one of the closing sessions. So really appreciate the opportunity. And if anybody has questions, we're around. Thank you so much.
Thanks for starting your week with us.
Hard to wave with you.